Hello, everybody. A warm welcome to this live event, specifically for Shell. I hope this event finds you all in a safe place and in good health. My name is Sonja van Ballard, and I'm the Client Director on behalf of IBM for Shell. We have 45 minutes together, specifically for your company, to talk about IBM's Environmental Intelligence Suite, which was announced in October of this year. It was very timely because COP26 was upon us, and we knew, of course, that the world's attention was going to be on the weather, on climate, and on carbon. And that's exactly the topics and the capabilities that this suite of applications offers to you. It offers weather and climate risk management, predictive industry use cases, and of course, carbon accounting. We have 3 speakers today that are going to dive into this matter. They'll give you short presentations and you can engage with them using the Q&A, which you find alongside the recording. And then we'll be able to address your questions at the end of this event. The first speaker, next chart please, the first speaker will give you an overview of IBM's Environmental Intelligence Suite. So allow me to introduce to you John Simpa, who's actually the Senior Global Marketing Lead for EIS. John, over to you.
Yes, thank you, Sonja. Absolutely. You know, as we come out of COP26, we're seeing a lot of commitments and agreements between businesses and governments around deforestation pledges, looking at methane abatement, furthering to cut emissions of carbon dioxide, as well as agreements to invest much more heavily in more renewables around the world. And this is just a perfect time for us really at IBM to be offering the Environmental Intelligence Suite. You know, with the countries, 100+ countries having made pledges, consumers are really looking to invest more in products that offer them a more sustainable direction in terms of options. And then companies are really looking at making major investments in technology that allows them to achieve their goals related to sustainable development, as well as meet their investors' needs, meet their consumers' needs, and do good to the planet. So if you could go to the next slide, please. You know, can't not look anywhere in a newspaper or headlines in the news to see that extreme weather, climate action failure, and human-led environmental damage are really the top 3 risks. And as we enter the beginning of 2022, as we work into the World Economic Forum that's going to be taking place, these still remain as the top 3 risks to businesses. You know, key examples, you have wildfires in the US, in the western parts of the US, causing banks and insurance companies billions of dollars in loss and damage and financial exposure. You have floods in Germany that they haven't seen in a long time, causing huge amounts of infrastructure asset damage, huge amounts of recovery funds needed based on the flooding. You look over in industry, right? You look at what's happening in Taiwan, where they're having a major drought that's reducing the reservoir water, the water levels that are needed for the manufacturing of semiconductor, that's really putting a $100 billion industry in a very risky position with the lack of water to be able to do the production they need for semiconductors. And then you just look at our global food supply. Here in the US, we're seeing less frigid winters than what we used to see. And what's really important about the frigid winters or colder winters with a lot of ice and snow is that agriculture here in the Midwest really relies on that snow melt. It really relies on that buildup of water into the water systems that's related to snow melt. And if you have less snow melt, you're not able to get the resources you need for growing the crops. Next slide, please. So what are we seeing our clients and what are we seeing folks and industry leaders wanting to do? They're really wanting to have solutions that are part of an application suite, that are part of a platform that allow them to basically leverage climate, weather, and their own operational or supply chain data to monitor for disruption, specifically disruption around environmental conditions, severe weather, or climate risk mitigation. And then they're wanting to be able to look and predict how the potential impacts will impact various parts of their business, how it will impact their bottom line, their finances, how it's going to impact customer acquisition, how it's going to impact ability to deliver goods and services. And that prediction capability is really led by AI and all sorts of other computing powers that allow them to be able to, in more real time, make predictions, not just 1 day, 3 day, and 5 day out, but also along their service cycles. And then they want to be able to gain insights on their 1, 3, and 5 year planning, gain historical insights on why things may have happened if they're in a year where there's a particular positive impact or a negative impact, to try to gain those insights and understand the trends. And then they want to be able to, again, monitor and report on those related to the compliance and regulations that these companies are under. So they're wanting to be able to then pull all that together and be able to report on it and measure against it. Next slide, please. So the Environmental Intelligence Suite is an application suite we've pulled together that's really a new generation of applications. It's where we've pulled together our climate and weather data, where we've pulled together different tools, dashboarding and alerting, as well as geospatial analytics and AI, to really build out a platform for clients to be able to understand how to achieve sustainability initiatives, climate risk mitigation, understand environmental factors, ability for traceability and automation, and really holistically pulled it together for these different areas. Next slide, please. And this is key for helping a number of clients really plan for, predict, and manage climate risk. We're seeing these tools used in 3 different categories. One is related to operations, specifically around climate and weather. The second is for housing of data, environmental AI data management, as well as their own data management. And then how do you build that into sustainable processes such as carbon accounting, carbon performance management, renewables forecasting, and other aspects? And so there's a number of clients using these, and really in these 3 categories of how they're utilizing the application suite that was launched earlier this year. Next slide, please. I really think, if you look at a sustainable and resilient organization, it starts with your assets, your people, your processes, your supply chain, and your physical assets. And in order to do that, we're really seeing a number of categories come out in how we're helping clients with intelligent operations, build intelligent operations, infuse supply chain management with intelligence. And that's around weather intelligence, vegetation management and outage prediction, renewables forecasting and supplier assurance, climate risk analytics, and carbon performance. These are the key buckets or capabilities we're providing for these clients within the Environmental Intelligence Suite. And I'm going to go through a few client examples cross industry. And then when we go over to Matt's presentation, he's really going to dive deep into how the industry, oil and gas, energy companies are utilizing this software suite. So could you go to the next slide, please? First of all, weather intelligence. We work with a partner, a client of ours, Xship, which is a services company that helps vessel management companies reduce their overall impact on the environment through, first of all, energy management systems. They're using weather and EIS capabilities to be able to understand bunkering, to be able to understand dynamic routing for the vessels, so that overall they can have an impact on the energy usage, because it does cost a lot when you're having to move vessels around or when you're having to bunker them for long periods of time. It uses a lot of fuel, a lot of energy. Another one is Newport Aviation. The aviation industry has been key with utilizing weather intelligence since the beginning to help improve customer satisfaction, to help improve operations of the airlines as well as the airports, increase safety, and as well as create efficiencies around ground operations. Next slide. Another one's around supplier assurance, and this is an example of Yara, a large agribusiness company, where they're really looking to increase crop yield of the crops they're managing by decreasing and utilizing more regenerative agriculture practices, such as over-fertilization, use of chemicals. They're really looking at services that allow their contracted farmers to be able to produce more in a more sustainable manner. Hydro One is an example of using outage prediction within EIS. That is the ability to predict potential electric utility outages so that they can increase their restoration time. That is, when an event's happening, right before an event's happening, that is more around severe weather with outage prediction, but it also allows them to strategically stage and place personnel and equipment in the right areas during and beginning around a storm. Next slide, please. And my last slide I'm going to highlight is around carbon risk and climate risk analytics and carbon performance. These are two new capabilities we're offering. You know, we're working with a large electric utility here in the United States where it's all around wildfire management and detection. It is how do we allow that utility to understand where along their assets the climate in longer term periods, these are 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, year, and further periods of time, are going to impact where their assets are located so that they can better respond to or reduce wildfire damage that will take place throughout the course of the year. And then Norfolk Southern's another one where we worked with them around carbon performance. You know, they had switch gear that they were heating in very cold climates. And of course, the trains wouldn't be able to switch across tracks if they were frozen. And so they would keep all the heaters on during certain times of the year to make sure all the switching was ready. And they found that this was very costly and had a pretty large carbon footprint related to it. So working with them, we were able to use the Environmental Intelligence Suite to really reduce their heating switch costs, to be able to, in hyper-local areas, turn on the right switches in areas that really needed to have the ice either melted or the tracks heated. And this also had a direct correlation to a sustainability metric of theirs, which was related to carbon reduction. They were able to reduce their carbon emissions by about 70% relating to that operation of switchgear management, which is a really fascinating use case as well. Now I'm going to hand it over to Matt, who's going to dive a little bit deeper into how the industry, oil and gas, and energy companies are utilizing our platform.
Thank you very much, John. Very nice to be with everybody today. As John said, I'm going to talk in a little more specifics about how energy companies are using the IBM Environmental Intelligence Suite to manage operations, climate risk, and also sustainability. You know, the Environmental Intelligence Suite helps organizations understand the impact of the environment on business, and also the other way around, the impact of business on the environment. And so some of the key capabilities support sustainability, decarbonization, and emission reduction efforts with CO2 tracking, compliance, and reporting tools. It also allows optimization of, you know, asset performance, asset lifecycle management with weather, climate, and environmental impact models and analysis around severe weather, things like wildfires, flooding, air quality, and again, carbon emissions. And we also have industry-specific add-ons that I'll talk about in a little more detail as we go through the presentation here. But an example is renewable energy, like wind and solar. We have a platform that allows for more accurate generation forecasts. Next slide, please. One of my favorite use cases for IBM Environmental Intelligence Suite revolves around Shell specifically. So a little over 3 years ago, Shell was just constructing a polymer plant in Western Pennsylvania, and they had some issues with severe weather, specifically around moving large numbers of resources, construction resources, people out to the plant site. Getting people out there was very costly, a couple of $100,000, if I remember correctly. And they ran into issues where they would have the night staff on, a line of thunderstorms would come through, and they would have to quickly remove the staff from the construction site, which was even more costly. And so Shell turned to IBM. We used Operations Dashboard, which is a component of IBM Environmental Intelligence Suite, along with some of our consultant meteorologists to help them optimize the movement of workers to and from that construction site. And you know, from what I understand, that was a success and is still being leveraged at that location. Next slide. Another capability within IBM Environmental Intelligence Suite is the AI-driven vegetation management solution that IBM has developed. And it's applicable for, really anywhere that vegetation is encroaching on, business assets. For example, it could be an overhead power line or conductor. It could be a natural gas pipeline. The picture you see here is a natural gas pipeline right-of-way. And so we leverage remote sensing technologies along with a multitude of imagery options. It could be high-resolution satellite data. It could be LiDAR data. We're really imagery agnostic within the tool. And it allows, energy companies the ability at any point in time to understand right away vegetation management needs in a condition-based environment where historically, you will go, cut vegetation every 5 years, every 10 years. And then there's a lot of waste associated with that spend. And so what we do is we help provide a condition-based assessment of where and when you should be performing vegetation management. And it could be natural gas pipelines. It could be onshore well pads. There's a multitude of use cases for this particular solution. Next slide, please. One thing I would like to talk about is the platform that sits behind our vegetation management solution. It is called Geospatial Analytics. That is a component of IBM's Environmental Intelligence Suite. And basically what it is, it's a platform that organizes and makes sense of very massive geospatial temporal data sets, combining, proprietary data sets to IBM around things like weather. It could be, foliage, and then combine those with customer data, including, asset inventory, condition and location of, historical issues, outages, whatever it may be, to provide, a more concise look at how the environment is impacting business. A really unique capability that IBM has developed as a result of our work around vegetation management is within our vegetation model, we also have a tree species model. So we are modeling, what type of tree species is located in a particular place. And so what we can do is take the canopy size along with the species info and estimate the amount of carbon that each tree captures. That's really important for sustainability efforts, particularly around reforestation programs. And we have a white paper that we've written about this particular capability. So if that is of interest, I'm sure that we would be happy to share that with anyone that would like to read it. Next slide, please. Another capability is climate risk analytics. So climate change has been a key factor in the intensity and the frequency of storm events, whether it be winter storm events, flooding events, could be a tropical event. But I think everyone can agree that it seems just globally storms are getting stronger and more severe. And so, what geospatial analytics allows you to do is include, maps, graphs, cartograms, and show historical changes. And then when we see the historical changes, we can make projections into the future, maybe it's 5 years, 10 years, 30 years on what the expected difference or delta in, climate normals would be over time, and try to identify those climate anomalies in moving forward that could have a severe impact on business performance overall. Next slide, please. Some examples of the types of data that you can find within the geospatial analytics piece of IBM Environmental Intelligence Suite are shown here. Flood risk in Louisiana, for example, where there is a huge number of oil and gas and chemical producing and logistics supply chain assets. With the rising sea levels along the Louisiana coast, it is becoming increasingly important to understand what the flood risk is associated with the assets in those regions, particularly in the summer and autumn months around tropical season when hurricanes are a significant threat. The other image you see is a wildfire risk index in the state of California that highlights exactly when and where wildfires can be either, expected or, where the risk is high associated with, environmental conditions like weather. Is it really dry? Has it been really dry for a period of time? So there's a lot of fuel on the ground, which promotes, these large, really aggressively moving wildfires that we've seen in the state of California, and generally speaking across the Northern Hemisphere and Australia over the last several years. Next slide, please. A new capability within IBM Environmental Intelligence Suite, and something we're very excited about as we move more towards, capabilities around sustainability, is enterprise carbon accounting. So we provide a set of APIs. The carbon accounting APIs are a collection of 6 endpoints in accordance with GHG protocol that can be used against a structured data set to return scope 1, 2, and 3 emission details. And what we are doing specifically is, automating the very manually driven collection of that data and automating the calculations by using AI augmentation and natural language processing to transform that data and then ultimately streamline, automate, and operationalize carbon accounting to meet sustainability and carbon reduction goals. Next slide, please. And so, climate change, again, has been a key factor in increasing intensity and frequency of adverse weather conditions like flooding and wildfires. So consequently, businesses must plan and prepare. And so, IBM is making a dedicated effort in supporting sustainability goals and carbon reduction goals for all of our clients worldwide. And what I've found in just, my research as a sales professional is that, there's a lot of compensation for C-level executives in very large companies that are tied to carbon reduction goals. And so that is a significant focus of ours. And things like, being able to capture, the amount of carbon that a tree, captures is pretty exciting for me personally, and as someone who's always been fascinated by the environment. It's very exciting to be a part of this effort, as IBM moves into the, sustainability arena and begins to support companies around, these very aggressive emissions goals. Next slide, please. And then the last thing I'll talk about in detail as far as capability, this is another industry add-on similar to our vegetation management solution. We have built out a platform to, accurately forecast the generation of renewable energy assets, whether it be wind assets or solar assets. And so the renewable forecasting platform generates high accuracy forecasts of wind and solar farms and leverages advanced analytics, sophisticated instrumentation, and then of course, my background, best in class weather data to provide a frequency of forecasting that includes nowcasting, which is, right now out to 1 hour, short term, which is, basically later today, and then the day ahead, which could be out to 10 days, along with, weekly, monthly, and even yearly views of, forecasted generation capacities for wind and solar assets. Next slide, please. And then some of the performance, improvements that we've seen with specific clients are really jump off the page to me and move the needle. Forecasting 30-meter hub height winds is difficult. Forecasting solar irradiance across a solar farm or solar array is very difficult. And so the fact that we've been able to have numbers like, a 30% improvement in solar forecast accuracy, 15% improvement in wind forecasting accuracy, and then see, our clients realize real business performance improvements around their forecasting abilities of their renewable assets is very exciting. And then having a number, 92% forecast accuracy for day ahead with wind and solar for the entire state of Vermont and Vermont Electric's, renewables assets. That's all very exciting work, and very happy to be a part of it. That's really it for my piece of this forecast, this presentation. And right now I'm going to turn it over to our senior meteorologist and senior solutions engineer, Jeff Gorick, for a short demo. Thank you very much for your time.
My name is Jeff Gorick, and I'm going to demonstrate the IBM Environmental Intelligence Suite, sometimes called as EIS, even ICE sometimes. So Environmental Intelligence Suite is a combination of multiple products now offered together. Weather data being one of the main components. There's also geospatial analytics, dashboard visualizations, alerts, as well as a sustainability dashboard. There's even tools such as vegetation management add-ons that I wanted to show you as well. So yeah, I will demonstrate each of these capabilities very briefly today, but wanted to start out by just talking about weather data. So weather data is a foundational component to Environmental Intelligence Suite, because weather information, once you average it, can turn into climate information, and it can be used to build climate products and climate risk, as well as looking at weather risk as well. Now, weather data can come in many different forms. You can think of weather data as being what's happening right now, maybe forecasted information about what's happening a couple hours from now, a couple days from now, or even a couple months ahead or years ahead. So weather information can be used a lot of different ways. We also have historical weather information, which is great for building models and looking at past analysis and see how weather and climate has changed over a period of time related to assets. This weather data can come in multiple formats, such as point data, site-by-site location, or in geospatial formats. And IBM's weather information is best in class. Now, we are the world's largest weather provider, providing the most accurate data worldwide. That's a very scalable platform, and it's very precise. So you're going to get information exactly where you need it. So kind of quickly going through weather information, I wanted to give you one quick example of what you could do with it. So this is a chart and just a quick little Python notebook that I developed that actually does a couple things. One is it takes historical weather information, plots it over time, and in this case, since I'm in Boulder, Colorado, wanted to show snowfall statistics. So this is snowfall in inches from 1950, actually going to 2060. So what you can see in the blue and green is observed annual snowfall values and how they vary over time. And one thing that you can see is that you can start to see that, okay, snow, there's the variation of snow. It's certainly variable. It changes year to year, that sort of thing. But you can see that there are bounds to it, and you can see the trends over time. And if I wanted to build a predictive model and say, okay, based on what I've seen in the past, I'd like to build a predictive model and say, what can I expect out of this, years to come? This is a simple model that I built to do that. That shows you, okay, if I were to project snow forecasts over the next 40 years, this is what it would look like. So this is really impactful, not just for, looking at when weather is going to impact a particular asset, but how will that asset be affected in years to come and that sort of thing and what you can expect. So the weather information that we have is extremely powerful. In addition to weather information, we have dashboard tools. This is our operations dashboard tool that is kind of comes up as one of the landing pages through Environmental Intelligence Suite here. So you can see there's a menu of services on the left here. But right away what you see is that we're monitoring weather impacts across many locations globally, and these just happen to be the ones that we've put here. Now, what we've done too is we've organized these and say, okay, we can look and say, of all of my assets, what's affected by weather now, today, tomorrow, all the way up until the week ahead for everything. Now, each of these locations is going to have different impacts and different thresholds that affect it. Some areas will receive lightning more than others, whereas snowfall is going to impact other layers quite as well. So there's lots of different things that you can do. We can zoom in on a particular location. In this case, this is Adelaide, so in Australia. We can look at their dashboard and what's going on. So there's lots of different modules happening here. At the top, you can see there's a red bar indicating there's a critical alert that was set up. And that's just when, in this case, again, this is very customizable, configurable to your needs. When wind gusts exceed a certain amount, this sets off an alert. Now, these can be, like I said, customized based on the needs of the particular asset or location. So there's tools like the interactive map that's on here, and I'll get into that a little bit more in just a second. But there's a forecast table of hourly and daily forecasts. There's time series of certain weather components. There can even be things like range rings for lightning and other things that you can add. There's lots of different things that you can do to add alerting. Now, you can actually set up these notifications and receive email notifications or even push notifications on the mobile device called Operations Dashboard as well. If you would like to receive more kind of larger scale alerts, we've developed a tool to deliver mass notifications. Now we're talking about tens to hundreds of thousands of people. We have a platform that does that can deliver specific thresholds with specific messaging. In the case that you have, employees, customers, partners, anybody that is interested in whether that could impact them. So lots of different information. If I were to go, I wanted to quickly look at this interactive map so you can see the type of weather information, all built on the weather company data here. So you can see that there's a map showing, and what I'm actually showing now is a wildfire risk for the state of Texas, along with animated kind of wind vectors, so you can see which way the winds are blowing. But there are hundreds of different location or weather layers that you can choose from here. Basic things like radar and satellite to temperature to looking at snow cover and even things offshore such as wave height and period. And then if you're in the, wanting to know what's going on the roads, there's even things like road weather and traffic. You can overlay all sorts of information like what are the local, what are the storm reports, what are the storm tracks, even things like earthquakes, traffic incidents, and tropical information. That's all available to you here. You do have tie-ins to Maximo, which is IBM's enterprise asset management tool. So if you have assets that you'd like to bring in, this is something that you can do and monitor within Environmental Intelligence Suite. This custom layers, this is something like this wildfire map that I've created here. So you can see that you can create custom maps. Maybe you want to build a custom model. That could be a wildfire map, a flood map, that sort of thing, and bring it in and visualize it within this tool here. There's lots of different things that you can do. If I were to go to the geospatial analytics tool, you can see that this geospatial analytics tool combines a lot of weather information, not just weather information, a lot of geospatial information. It could be satellite information, demographic information, as well as weather and climate information. And the idea is that these are very heavy layers. So we've created this repository where clients can access these data easily and create and run analytics off them. So there's lots of different possibilities and things that you can do within this tool. We have a few examples that are just kind of shown on this user interface. However, a lot of our customers actually use this kind of in a coding sense as well. So they might hand it over to our data science to start to look at things. So some examples of what you can do within the system would be, looking at basic things like population density, or maybe when the onset of winter comes because of leaves falling on trees. You can start to model flood risk and drought impacts. You can look at wind energy throughout certain territories. You can do lots of different applications based on whatever use case you want. But again, this could be weather, climate, or something else focused. One One specific use case would be wind energy forecast. So in this case, I'm looking at, IBM has a tool to generate renewable energy forecasts that are at the solar farm or wind turbine level. So we use this by using different weather models, machine learning, to come up with the best approach to say what are the winds at any given location. So there's a lot of model building that goes into this, a lot of analytics and AI that come to this to offer a very accurate forecast. So what we take are the weather company forecasts as part of the input, as well as a lot of additional analytics. Now, finally, or not finally, but another piece of this EIS portfolio would be vegetation management. Now, vegetation management was actually developed for, first for energy and utility companies where vegetation trees affected their power assets or overlying wires and that sort of thing. So through this, we're using, machine learning and high level data science to look at imagery sources and find out where are the trees and what is their impact on a particular, area. So what you can see here is that there's some color coding, and I'm going to actually click off the vegetation real quick so you can see that. You can see there are areas that have different colors. There's greens, which mean good, and red is bad, and that sort of thing. So this will tell clients where vegetation is most impactful to their operations. And you can click on that and start to see different KPIs related to where they are, maybe how close a certain thing is to vegetation in their particular asset. We even have tools to look at, the species. So what is the percentage of species within a given area? Now, with species identification in this tool that we've developed, we can also do expanded case or use cases where we look at sustainability initiatives by looking, since we can model where the trees are and how large they are, we can also then quantify how much carbon they're taking from the atmosphere. So if you chop down a tree or a set of trees, what is their impact going to be? So as we get into more sustainability push, using a tool like vegetation management is great for situational awareness, but also has many other applications related to sustainability. And then specific to sustainability, we also have a dashboard that can be provided that shows some outputs and measures that are becoming more and more important in the business scape. So we want to look at, what are our emissions of carbon, that sort of thing. Where are emissions coming from scope 1 and scope 2 emissions types? So you can see we have that broken down here. So in this case, we have time series showing you different emissions by type and broken down even further here to allow clients to estimate and quantify their carbon footprint. You can see that there's more emissions detail over on the right panel. Now going to the bottom, you can start to see, okay, what can we do for conservation measures and adding in things like renewables to our mix, and you can start to see that we can track not only historical data but also future use, so that we can track and see how sustainability and how carbon footprint is changing over times. And ultimately, if you have a measure to reduce emissions, you can start to track and see what's happening year over year, or even possibly even more granular, to see how sustainability measures are impacting. So at a very quick glance, the Environmental Intelligence Suite is a suite of tools to allow weather and climate analytics as well as sustainability measures to be utilized. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you very much, Jeff, John, and Matt. We've gotten an overview of the Environmental Intelligence Suite. We saw some great business examples with very specific use cases for different industries, but particularly also for energy-related industries and also the natural world. And then Jeff gave us a demo, highlighting all of these capabilities, starting with the weather and climate and the risks related to that, looking into these industry use cases, and ending with this very important topic of carbon accounting. In closing, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I think you will see the LinkedIn and the contact information for our 3 eminent speakers, and we hope to pursue this dialogue with you offline in your respective businesses. Thanks again for attending and wishing you well. Goodbye.